Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Back at you. I am a museum full of art. But you had your eyes shut. Hello, hey there. I feel like this disgusting lighting is never going to go away. So, also the eye contact thing is probably never gonna get any better. I've accepted it. Hope you do too. So, I really want to do a very quick video to kind of bring a discussion, if you will. In one of my classes, we actually read this article that I've been thinking about for a very long time. I know that one of the hot topics that gets people clicking very fast on any sort of media would be the concept of not just poetry, that might turn some people off actually, but the whole concept of Instagram poetry. You either love it, you either hate it. If you're like me, you're just kind of in the middle. You let it do its own thing. It either surprises you or it disappoints you and you swear to never let yourself get tricked again, and then you walk right into Target, pick up a really nice looking book because it has an amazing cover, and then it turns out that you picked up another Instagram poetry book by Alright Sin. Just the way life goes, actually. The article I'm referring to is titled Two Turntables and a Storytelling Tradition, in which it opens up by saying, "The scratch is an interruption. It breaks the linearity of the text, the progressive secularity of the song. It takes a listener or reader back and forth through the song underneath the apparatus that plays it, either to insert some other song or for the sheer pleasure of the scratch itself." What was noise? What was seen as a sign of a broken record or stylus? An unwelcome interruption in the continual march of text, groove, history became a purposeful interruption, became pleasurable, became a way to insert other voices in the text to redirect one's attention. To put it differently, in a moment when many compositionists have identified the mix and remix as tropes for digital writing practices, to the point of arguing, as Jondon Johnson, Ilola, and Stuart Silber have, that we live and write in a remix culture. So keep that in mind. The scratch here, what is called the remix, is considered to be an interruption, and that's kind of what I want to talk about poetry as sort of a scratch, sort of an interruption to the literary canon. Let's go for the whole entire thing. Let me tell you guys a little memory, a little story if you could. Actually, it's just the introduction from one of my essays from last quarter. It is June 27, 2019, and this is the Barnes & Noble at the Grove, Los Angeles. A friend and I are waiting in line for one of their events up on the 3rd floor. It is warm, the place is crowded, and I am told by one of the workers that they are at maximum capacity. The event we are waiting for is a special book signing for the Barnes & Noble special edition of Rupi Kaur's second poetry collection, The Sun and Her Flowers. Everyone who has purchased a ticket also receives a copy of the hardback upon admission, which is to be signed by the author herself, then followed by a photo op. In comparison with its standard paperback, which was released nearly 2 years prior, there is no outstanding difference in content of the book. The text is the same, the art is the same, there is no added preface or introduction that precedes the first set of poems in the book. In fact, the only notable difference is the transition from paperback to hardback, with a new cover depicting what appears to be daisies on a yellow surface, replacing the previous sunflowers from the cream-colored paperback. Along with both the new and older edition of The Sun and Her Flowers, one is also able to bring their copies of Kaur's first published and highly distinguished debut, Milk and Honey, to get those autographed as well, and that note there is really all one needs by means of an explanation as to why this event is even possible in the first place. Milk and Honey. Published in 2014 by Andrew McNeil, the book received almost immediate worldwide success, with the book being listed on the New York Times bestsellers for over 77 weeks and being translated into 25 languages. However, despite all of its successes, praises, and the sudden renewal of poetry into the mainstream, the book has caused a great divide within the literary community, with many calling the book lazy, uninspired, a disappointment, etc. Going as far as to dub Kaur an Instagram poet or Insta poet due to it having been the online community that allowed the book prominence, academia and scholarship have largely ignored and devalued the significance that the book Kaur and her similar contemporaries have brought to the interest and marketability of poetry as a whole. Now, after the entire introduction, you might actually think that I will sing the praises to Milk and Honey forever, forever, and for always. That's not the case there. I really do appreciate Milk and Honey. I do appreciate the discussions that I was able to have and the fact that it's been able to bring up these new ways of thinking about what poetry is, what English literature is. The book is just not really for me as a whole. There's a good myriad of poems I really do like, but for the most part, the poems don't stick with me. Book as a whole, it's just a comfortable read. So, but the actual poems themselves, and they're hit or miss for me. My favorite one is one about water. I am water, soft enough to offer life, tough enough to drown it away. One of the main themes from the article from class was the whole, again, concept of the remix, but not just remix as in, getting something and bringing it newer in a more physical aspect, like republishing a book in a special edition. The article actually goes further and says that the remix can also be history and our present. For example, the article does state that the remixer, the DJ, is between tradition and future. The ways in which racial inequalities are calcified in 21st century America hardened in the veins of our society, even as there is less and less room in public discourse and policy work for either redress or even honest dialogue. Call us to a repositioning, a different way of seeing the relationships between tradition and future in the shaping of new approaches to present challenges and possibilities. Does Milk and Honey fit the bill as something that's remixing literature, something that's getting something old and making it newer again? I actually believe that it does kind of do that. Might not be your favorite way of doing it, but it kind of does it. For example, Kaur added to the 2016 printing of Milk and Honey. Kaur does state that the simple and direct writing of the book was never really intended to be something for aesthetics. People actually criticize the way it looks. They will just say that all you have to do is hit the enter key and it'll give you one of these Rupi Kaur looking poems. But she does state, when I began writing poetry in high school, I have a deep desire to write in my mother tongue. There is a beauty in its design. Gurmukhi is a scripture in which Punjabi is written only using the period. There is no punctuation, all letters are treated the same, no distinction between upper and lowercase. She's essentially getting, the way, the form that something from old scripture looked like and reinventing it for modern audiences, and not reinventing it in the, oh look, I'm the one who invented this again, but something that's been thrust into mainstream pop culture, which would be the way Milk and Honey looks, which has been adapted by a myriad of people, some of them white, let's face it. Between her older Milk and Honey and her newer book, The Sun and Her Flowers, I actually do prefer The Sun and Her Flowers because we do get a demonstration of some of this remixing of old meets the new and what do you do with that. For example, in Female Feticide, that poem, brings many things to the forefront here. She does state in the 1790 section of the poem, he takes the newborn girl from his wife, carries her to the neighboring room, cradles her head with his left hand, and gently snaps her neck with his right. The poem does go on, but essentially what she's doing is doing this kind of historical oversight of this has been going on in my culture, this has been going on in the world, and in a way it does continue. This is the way that females are treated now. And then even in the poem Immigrants from Sun and Her Flowers as well, she does say they have no idea what it is like to lose home at the risk of never finding home again. To have your entire life split between two lands and become the bridge between two countries. Do I think Rupi Kaur, do I think Instagram poetry is helping these narratives get a little remix, get attention in this new era? I do think that is the case. And some of the backlash against it could be it's too simple, it's too this, it's too that. This kind of stuff isn't new. I mean, look at some of the work by the older white men. Look at the Beats, for example. While they are currently praised, at that time they were also severely criticized because of the language and the style that they were using. The article even mentions how some of the DJs here, they are kind of seen as time benders because of the whole remix culture. Instagram poetry, one of the criticisms is that it is produced so very quickly. There's just no time to send it out to journal. There's no time for constant editing, any of that stuff. I do think that we can start to see Instagram poetry, some of these poets, some of these artists as time benders. They're producing in real time. That's kind of commendable to some extent. What is the world currently thinking? Go to your Instagram, type in hashtag poetry and see what comes out. See what comes out during turbulent time. See what the youth is talking about. Like I said, the Beats were heavily criticized for their language and their style back then, and they are severely praised right now. I'm kind of wondering, the Instagram poets, Rupi Kaur, are they being criticized heavily right now, only to be lauded in the future? Is that something that could happen? Who knows? But anyway, since apparently it is only white men who can produce amazing works of literature, despite how short or long the work may be, let me indulge in some. Certainly, this is much more better and colorful than anything Rupi Kaur has ever written. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater, besides the white chickens. This is an American classic.